I stood there in the dim hallway, the glow from my phone screen casting a cold light on my face. My heart pounded as my eyes scanned the text message that shattered whatever remained of my carefully reconstructed world. It was a screenshot. A single, damning screenshot from another friend. His name, my best friend's name, a string of messages that could not be explained away. They had been seeing each other. While I had been busy trying to trust again, trying to hold on to the pieces of what I thought was love, they had been tearing it all apart behind my back. The pain hit me like a wave, drowning me in a mix of disbelief and the most searing kind of betrayal. I could not breathe. I could not think. My fingers went numb, and the phone nearly slipped from my hand. I had taken him back once. I had believed in redemption, in change, in second chances. And now, here I was, watching the truth unravel in a few cruel lines of text. I never thought I would feel this kind of devastation again, and I never imagined it would come from the two people I loved most. It all began 7 years earlier, in the most unassuming way possible. I was not the kind of woman who chased after romance. I had always been practical, thoughtful, and a little guarded with my heart. But when I met David, something shifted. He was charming without being overwhelming, attentive without being clingy. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, the kind where everyone knows someone but no one really knows everyone. He sat across from me and made a joke about the dry chicken on our plates. I laughed, not because the joke was especially funny, but because it was the way he delivered it. Confident, easy, like he had been doing it all his life. We talked the rest of the evening. About music, travel, our jobs, our families. He was working in marketing and had dreams of launching his own brand one day. I was working at a small publishing house and dreaming of someday writing my own novel. We were different in many ways, but we clicked in all the ways that mattered, or at least I thought we did. We started dating not long after. At first, it was light and fun. Weekend getaways, long walks through the city, late-night phone calls that stretched into the early morning. But over time, it became more serious. He made me feel seen. He remembered small things I said in passing and would bring them up weeks later. He held the door for me, sent flowers on random Tuesdays, and told me I made him want to be a better man. I fell hard, and I fell fast. My friends noticed a change in me. I smiled more, I worried less. Even my mother, who rarely approved of anyone, said she had a good feeling about him. We moved in together after 1.5 years. It felt right. We found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, decorated it together, built routines that felt like a shared life. Sundays were for groceries and cooking. Wednesdays were movie nights. He would kiss me on the forehead every morning before he left for work, and I would wait up for him even on the nights he came home late. We talked about the future often. Marriage, kids, a house with a garden. He promised me all of it, and I believed him. I had no reason not to. Looking back now, I can see the little cracks that had started to form even then. Moments that did not quite fit. Conversations that ended too quickly. Nights he came home with excuses that seemed rehearsed. But at the time, I ignored them. I told myself that every couple has their ups and downs. I believed love was supposed to require work, patience, and forgiveness. I gave all of that, and more. I met Chloe around the same time David and I became serious. She joined our friend group through another mutual friend and we clicked almost immediately. She was bright, outgoing, the kind of person who walked into a room and made everyone feel like they mattered. Over time, she became one of my closest friends. We would grab coffee together, vent about work, talk about our relationships. I never once doubted her loyalty. She was the one I called when I had a fight with David. She was the one who stood next to me when I tried on dresses for our anniversary dinner. She felt like family. Everything seemed stable for a while. Life moved forward. We traveled, we celebrated birthdays and holidays, we talked about buying a dog. There were rough patches, of course, arguments, disagreements about money, about how much time he spent at work. But we always came back to each other. I thought that was a sign of strength. I thought that meant we had something real. Then, almost 3 years into our relationship, everything changed. It was a message from a woman I did not know. She said she had been involved with David. She said she was sorry and that she had only found out he was in a relationship after the fact. My hands shook as I read it. I confronted him that night. He cried. He told me it had meant nothing, that it had been during a rough time, that he had been confused, that he loved me, that he would do anything to fix it. I did not know what to do. I was devastated, angry, humiliated, but I was also still in love. And so I made a choice I never thought I would make. I forgave him. I told myself that people make mistakes, that love was not always black and white. I wanted to believe that the man I loved was still in there somewhere, trying to be better. We started over. We worked on our relationship. He made promises. He said all the right things. And for a while, it seemed like we were going to make it. But I should have known. I should have trusted my instincts. Because what I did not know was that the next betrayal would cut even deeper. That the next time, it would not just be him I lost. It would be her, too. The person I had leaned on. The person I had trusted like a sister. And the worst part? They both smiled in my face while they were doing it. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when everything changed. I was sitting at my desk, half listening to a conference call, sipping coffee that had long gone cold, when a notification lit up my phone. It was a message request from someone I did not know. At first, I ignored it. Spam messages were common, and I was in the middle of trying to focus. But something about the preview stopped me. The words were too specific. My name. David's name. I opened the message, and as my eyes moved across the screen, I felt the blood drain from my face. The woman's message was polite, almost too gentle for the kind of storm it carried. She wrote that she had been seeing David for a few months. She had no idea he was in a relationship. She had found my profile by accident, seen a photo of the two of us, and realized the truth. She said she felt terrible. That she would never knowingly be involved with someone who was already taken. She apologized. And then, as if to make it all real, she attached screenshots of their conversations, flirtatious messages, plans to meet, late-night declarations that made my stomach twist. I stared at the screen, unblinking. For a long time, I did not move. It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. There was no denying it. It was David. His words, his tone, even the way he ended his texts with a smiley face, it was all him. I felt nauseous. My body began to shake, not from cold but from something deeper, something primal. Betrayal has a way of turning your insides out. I called him immediately. My voice was sharp, breathless, unrecognizable. I asked him if there was anything he wanted to tell me. At first, there was silence. Then a quiet, cautious, "What do you mean?" I pushed harder. Told him about the message. The screenshots. The woman. There was a long pause, and then he sighed. Not the sigh of someone caught in a terrible misunderstanding. It was the sigh of someone who had run out of excuses. He admitted it. He said it had happened during a time when things were complicated between us. That he had been stressed. That he had felt distant from me. That it was not serious. That it meant nothing. He said all the things people say when they are trying to bury a mistake, hoping the dirt will hold and the roots will not spread. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But in that moment, I was too stunned to feel anything but a hollow, aching silence. That night, I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the wall. David was there, pacing, talking, trying to explain. He kept saying he loved me. That he did not want to lose me. That he had made a mistake, the worst mistake of his life. I listened, but it all sounded distant, like I was underwater and his voice could not reach me. I kept thinking about all the times I had waited up for him. All the kisses goodbye. All the times I had said, "I love you," without knowing what he had been doing behind my back. The next day, I confided in my closest friend, Chloe. I told her everything. I cried on her shoulder, and she held me tightly, whispering that I deserved better. That I did not have to decide anything right away. That she would be there, no matter what. My mother, when I finally told her, was less gentle. She had never trusted David completely, and this, to her, confirmed every doubt she had kept quiet over the years. Once a cheater, she said softly, is often always a cheater. But even she did not push. She just looked at me with tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much disappointment in her own life. 4 days, I wandered through a fog. I did not know what to do. One part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. To pack a bag, leave the key on the counter, and disappear into something new. But another part of me, the part that still loved him, clung to hope. I remembered the good times. The way he made me laugh when I was sad. The way he had stood beside me when my father was sick. The dreams we had shared, the life we had built. Could I really throw all of that away? David did not give up. He apologized constantly. He left notes on my pillow. He sent flowers to my office. He started seeing a therapist on his own, saying he needed to understand why he had done what he did. He asked me to come with him. He said he wanted to fight for us. That he would never forgive himself, but that he would spend every day trying to earn back my trust. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that people could change. After weeks of long conversations, nights filled with tears, and moments where I questioned everything I thought I knew, I made my decision. I told him I would try. I would give him one chance to prove that he meant it. That he was willing to do the work. That he was not just sorry he got caught, but truly sorry for the pain he caused. I was not naive. I knew it would not be easy. Forgiveness is not a light switch. It is a slow, grinding process, filled with doubt and moments of relapse. But I loved him. And I believed, at the time, that love was worth fighting for. So we began again. Cautiously. With boundaries, with therapy, with conversations that peeled back every layer of what had gone wrong. I tried to be honest about my pain, and he tried to be transparent about his intentions. It felt fragile, but there was hope. I told myself that people make mistakes. That relationships are not perfect. That sometimes, the strongest bonds are the ones that are tested and survive. But even as I chose to stay, there was a quiet voice inside me that had started to whisper. A voice that wondered if this was really love, or if it was just the fear of starting over. A voice that asked if I was forgiving him, or just abandoning myself. I pushed that voice down, told it to be quiet. Because I wanted to believe that this was a one-time mistake. I needed to believe that he would never do it again. I did not know then how cruelly wrong I would be. I did not know that the next betrayal would not just destroy my relationship, but also unravel one of the most important friendships of my life. We started over in the quietest of ways. There was no big speech, no dramatic reunion. Just a mutual decision to try again. David moved back in after 2 months of space and difficult conversations. The first few days were awkward, filled with nervous silences and careful distance, like we were strangers tiptoeing around the wreckage of what had once been our home. I had made it clear, this was his second and final chance. He knew it, and I think that awareness settled into every move he made. Therapy became our weekly ritual. Every Wednesday evening, we sat across from a woman named Marcia in a softly lit office filled with calming colors and the faint scent of lavender. She listened as I poured out my pain and as David tried to explain what had led him astray. I was not always composed. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I sat in silence, arms folded, staring at the wall. David, to his credit, never walked out. He listened. He asked questions. He admitted his faults without defensiveness, and I began to wonder if perhaps real change was possible after all. Outside of therapy, he made visible efforts to rebuild the life we had nearly lost. He became more communicative, texting me during the day to check in, making sure I knew where he was. He no longer went out without telling me, and if plans changed, he called rather than sent a vague message. He began cooking dinner some nights, little meals he had found online. They were not always great, but it was the effort that mattered. He left sticky notes with kind words on the bathroom mirror. He brought me tea when I stayed up too late reading. He even offered to join a book club with me, something I never imagined him doing. For a while, I began to feel something like hope. It was fragile and easily shaken, but it was there. I caught myself smiling again, laughing at jokes, making plans. Friends noticed the shift, though they remained cautious. My mother was still wary, never forgetting how easily I had been hurt before, but she respected my choice and kept her reservations quiet. Chloe, of course, was my biggest cheerleader. She said it was brave of me to forgive, that not many people had the strength to rebuild after a betrayal. She came over often, bringing wine and silly stories to lift my mood. She said she was proud of me for holding my boundaries, for not giving up on love just because it had gotten messy. Chloe and David had always been friendly, and now that we were trying to move forward, she made more of an effort to support both of us. She would invite the two of us out for dinner or game nights with other friends. She would joke with him like before, always respectful, always appropriate. At least that was how it appeared. I had no reason to doubt her. She had seen me at my worst. She had cried with me, raged with me. She had listened to every doubt and every fear I had after the affair. I never imagined she would be anything but loyal. There were moments when I truly believed we would make it. On a rainy night in late October, we sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching old movies. David looked at me and said he felt lucky I had not given up on him. He said he thought about what he had done every day and that he was determined to never hurt me again. His eyes were soft, honest. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. And in that moment I did. Still, rebuilding trust was not a straight path. There were setbacks. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night with a jolt, remembering the messages, the lies, the betrayal. I would lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was being foolish. David always sensed it. He would reach for my hand and hold it quietly, as if to remind me he was still there, still trying. Other times I would see something on his phone, just a name, a comment, a message, and my stomach would twist, even if it was harmless. The wound was healing, but it was far from gone. I kept a journal during that time. I wrote down everything. My doubts, my hopes, the things he said that gave me reassurance. I documented every kind act, every therapy breakthrough. I wanted a record of our progress, something to hold on to when fear tried to pull me under again. Writing helped me feel grounded. It helped me see the small victories I might otherwise overlook. In therapy, we explored the patterns that had led us to the edge. We talked about communication, about emotional needs, about the dangerous ways resentment can build in silence. David opened up about his fears, of inadequacy, of failure, of not being enough. I shared my fear of being abandoned, of being made to feel like I was not worthy of loyalty. Marcia helped us see each other clearly, not just as partners, but as individuals with wounds of our own. We learned to speak in ways that did not blame, to listen without interrupting, to pause before reacting. Through it all, I poured myself into the relationship. I did the emotional heavy lifting. I created the space for healing. I tried to be understanding, even when it hurt. I gave grace, even when it was not always returned. I worked so hard to believe again. That was the part no one really saw. The exhausting effort it takes to put broken pieces back together without cutting yourself on the edges. Chloe continued to be around, more than ever. She was kind, funny, full of energy. She made David laugh, and I did not mind. I trusted her. She asked questions about how we were doing, encouraged our therapy sessions, celebrated our small steps forward. Sometimes, when she and David joked a little too easily, I reminded myself that they were friends, nothing more. She was my best friend. I never had a reason to see her as anything but that. By the time winter arrived, I felt cautiously optimistic. We had survived something that many couples never recover from. We were not perfect, but we were moving forward. I had chosen to believe in him again, to give love one more chance. It felt brave. It felt right. But underneath that hope, there was still something I could not name. A faint unease I pushed away each time it surfaced. Something in the way David sometimes looked at his phone when he thought I was not watching. Something in the way Chloe would quickly change the subject when I mentioned our weekend plans. Small things. Insignificant, I told myself. I had learned to trust again, and with that trust came vulnerability. I had opened myself up, let my guard down, and believed in something fragile. I had done everything I could to rebuild what was broken. What I did not know, what I could never have imagined, was that all the while, another betrayal was blooming in the shadows. One I would never see coming. One that would make me question not just my relationship, but every truth I thought I knew. It began slowly, like a change in season you only notice when the air feels different. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. After all, we had come so far. I did not want to undo all the progress we had made with paranoia or mistrust. But even so, something began to feel off, like an invisible thread pulling tighter each day. David started coming home later than usual. He would always have a reason, and most of the time it sounded plausible. Late meetings, helping a friend, traffic. I nodded and smiled, pretending I believed him completely, but a small knot had formed in my chest, and each time he walked through the door a little too late, it pulled tighter. Sometimes he would seem distracted when we talked, as if his mind was somewhere else. He would forget little things I told him, things that used to matter to him. Like what day my presentation at work was, or the fact that I had been feeling under the weather. When I asked if something was bothering him, he would brush it off and say he was just tired. He had changed the password on his phone. That was when I first felt the real crack. He used to leave it lying around, unlocked, without a second thought. Now it was always face down, locked, sometimes even in his pocket while we were just watching television. I asked him why, tried to sound casual. He said he was getting more spam calls and wanted to keep the phone on lockdown while at work. He even joked that he was protecting me from his boring inbox. I laughed, but inside, the knot twisted again. Around the same time, Chloe started coming over more often. At first, I welcomed it. She had always been a source of comfort, and after everything, I appreciated having her around. She was the one who knew every chapter of our story, who had held my hand through the darkest nights. But then her visits began to overlap more and more with times when David was home. I would come out of the shower and find them laughing together in the kitchen. I would return from the grocery store and hear their voices from the living room, hushed, but not in a way that was overtly secretive, just enough to feel private. She started texting me less and him more. It was subtle. I only noticed because there were times she would mention something David had said that I had not told her, and it would click. Oh, they must have talked directly. That in itself was not strange. They were friends. They had been for years. But somehow now it felt different. One night, I woke up and realized David was not in bed. I padded out into the living room, expecting to find him on the couch watching something, but he was standing by the window, whispering into his phone. He ended the call quickly when he saw me and said it was work. I did not question it, not then, but I could feel the trust one had worked so hard to rebuild begin to slip through my fingers like sand. I started paying attention. I noticed how often Chloe mentioned David's name in conversation. How she complimented him just a little more than before. How she laughed at his jokes even when they were not funny. How he seemed to light up a little too brightly when she was around. These were not obvious signs. They were fragments, small and scattered, but together they began to form a pattern I could not ignore. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. I had already lived through betrayal once. I did not want to believe I was walking back into that same fire. I reminded myself of how far we had come, of all the effort David had made. Maybe I was just being overly sensitive. Maybe I was still healing, and this was part of the process. But the feeling would not go away. One evening, Chloe and I went out for drinks, just the two of us. It had been a while since we had done that, and I was eager to reconnect. We laughed and caught up on life, and for a while, it felt like old times. But then, somewhere between stories and sips of wine, she said something that made my stomach turn. She mentioned that David had told her he was thinking about switching jobs, that he was feeling unfulfilled at work. I blinked, trying to hide my confusion. That was the first I had heard of it. I asked when they had talked, and she shrugged, saying it was just a quick chat earlier in the week. I nodded slowly, smiled tightly, and changed the subject. But inside, something cracked. Later that night, I asked David about it. He seemed caught off guard at first, then brushed it off as a passing thought he had not wanted to worry me with. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and asked if I wanted tea. I said yes, but I did not believe him. I began to feel like an outsider in my own relationship. Conversations felt like they had layers I could not see through. Inside jokes between Chloe and David made me feel like I was intruding. I started to wonder if I had created the space for something I had not intended. In trying to rebuild trust, had I become too lenient? Too eager to believe? Too willing to see the best in people who did not deserve it? I started to look back at small things. The night David had gone out for a drink with an old friend, and came back smelling like a perfume I did not recognize. The time Chloe had canceled plans with me last minute because she said she was not feeling well, and later, David had been unaccounted for. Nothing concrete. Just dots I had not connected, until now. I was afraid to say anything out loud. Afraid I would sound jealous or irrational. Afraid I would damage relationships that were still, in my mind, salvageable. But the more I stayed silent, the more the suspicion grew. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos. Ones of the three of us, me, David and Chloe, smiling at dinners, parties, beach days. There was one photo in particular that made me pause. It was from a barbecue in our backyard. David and Chloe were standing next to each other, laughing, and their bodies leaned just slightly inward, not inappropriately, but closely. And I could not help but see something in their faces, something I had not noticed before. Something that now made my heart race in the worst way. That was the night I could no longer deny it. Something was wrong. Something was happening, and I needed to know the truth. The woman I had trusted with every secret of my heart, and the man I had chosen to forgive, were at the center of a storm I could feel gathering around me. And I was about to find out just how deep the betrayal would go. It happened on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. The sun was pouring through the kitchen windows, and the scent of fresh coffee still lingered in the air. I had been working from home that week, taking some time to rebalance myself. Something had felt off for too long, and I thought maybe the space would help me see things more clearly. I never expected to find the truth buried in a forgotten corner of our home. David had left his laptop open in the living room. That in itself was not unusual, but something drew me to it, something quiet and insistent, a tug deep inside that I could no longer ignore. I sat down slowly, my heart thudding in my chest, not knowing exactly what I was looking for but feeling, with a strange certainty, that I was about to find it. I did not need to dig far. There were emails. Not many, but enough. At first, they looked harmless, event reminders, notes from work. Then I saw her name. Chloe. It was not the fact that she had emailed him that unsettled me, it was the subject line. Last night. I clicked. And everything changed. The message was not long, but it was enough. A memory captured in words I was never meant to see. She had written about how she could still feel him on her skin, how they had to be more careful, how she did not want to hurt me, but she could not stop. I read the words over and over, each time feeling like a fresh cut was being made in my chest. I felt my breath catch. My hands trembled. I wanted to close the laptop, to throw it across the room, to scream, but I could not move. I kept reading. I found more messages, some deleted, some half-drafted. There were dates, places, mentions of nights when David had told me he was working late, or out with friends, or helping someone move. All lies. All carefully constructed to protect something that should never have existed in the first place. It felt like I was falling into a black hole, each revelation pulling me deeper into disbelief. I sat there for what felt like hours, numb, cold, trying to understand how the two people I had trusted the most could do this to me. I replayed every conversation I had ever had with Chloe, every night David had come home late, every look, every smile, every time I had doubted my instincts and told myself I was being paranoid. And suddenly, everything made sense. There was the night I came home early from a weekend trip to visit my parents. I had texted Chloe to let her know I would not be staying the extra night, but she had not replied. When I got home, David had looked surprised. Nervous, even. He had said he was just catching up on sleep. The sheets had smelled faintly of her perfume, but I had not made the connection. I thought maybe it was mine. I had convinced myself that I was overthinking. There was the day I saw them standing too close in the kitchen, their laughter halting the moment I walked in. Chloe had said they were just reminiscing about a funny story I had forgotten. David had kissed my cheek and asked about my day. I had felt invisible, like a guest in my own life. There were so many moments, now illuminated by truth, that I could barely hold them all. It was like watching a puzzle come together, but the image it created was not one I had ever wanted to see. When David came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch, the laptop still open beside me. He smiled as he walked in, called my name, and began to tell me about his day. I did not speak. I simply turned the screen toward him. I watched his face change. First confusion, then realization, then panic. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. Do not lie, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Please, just do not lie. He sat down slowly, his eyes wide. For a moment, there was silence. Then he said her name. Chloe. Just that one word. And everything inside me shattered. The conversation that followed is something I can still hear in my mind, even now. He tried to explain. He said it had been a mistake. He said it was not serious. He said he had wanted to stop it, that he had not meant for it to go this far. He said he still loved me, that he always had. I asked him how long. He said it had been a few months. I told him I knew that was a lie. He lowered his eyes. I asked him why. He had no answer. He said it just happened, that he had been confused, that he had been feeling neglected, that it was not about me, but it was about me. It was about everything we had built, everything I had forgiven, everything I had fought for. It was about the second chance I had given him, the trust one had poured into him, the love I had held on to even when it hurt. It was about Chloe too, the woman who had stood beside me in every storm, the woman who had held me when I cried over his first betrayal, the woman I had trusted with my secrets, my fears, my heart. She had not only taken what was mine, she had pretended to protect me while doing it. I called her. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to see if there was any trace of the friend I once knew. She picked up on the second ring. She sounded surprised, then nervous. How long? I asked. There was silence. Then she whispered, I never meant to hurt you. That was not an answer. I hung up. There was nothing else to say. That night, I packed a bag. David tried to stop me, but I walked past him. I needed space. I needed to breathe without choking on the weight of betrayal. I went to a hotel. I lay on a cold bed and stared at the ceiling, my body still, but my mind racing through every memory I had ever shared with either of them. I cried until I could not anymore. It felt like the world had turned inside out, like I had stepped into an alternate version of my life where nothing made sense. But even in that pain, I began to feel something else, something quiet, something deep. I began to feel clarity. They had taken so much from me. My trust, my peace, my belief in love. But they had not taken me. I was still here. Hurt but whole. Wounded but standing. And I knew that this time, there would be no going back. The days that followed were a blur of silence and noise all at once. I would wake up each morning in that unfamiliar hotel bed, the white sheets twisted around my legs, the sun too bright through the windows. The first few seconds of waking were the worst. Those precious moments where my mind had not yet remembered the truth, when everything felt untouched, whole, familiar. Then the weight would crash down again, like a tidal wave, and I would curl into myself, hoping the pain would lessen if I stayed small enough. But it never did. I did not eat. I barely spoke. I would stare at the wall for hours, replaying every word, every image, every memory I had tried to hold on to. Everything felt like a lie now. I did not know who I had been with for the past few years. I did not know who my best friend really was. I did not even know who I was anymore. The anger came in sharp, brutal waves. It burned behind my eyes, clenched my fists, made me want to scream. I thought about going to their house. I thought about confronting them together, dragging the truth into the light for everyone to see. But then I would crash into grief again, too tired to move, too broken to fight. People began to find out. Of course they did. We had shared friends, a whole circle of people who had witnessed our relationship from the start. Some were shocked. Some tried to stay neutral. Others chose sides. I could feel the shift in their voices, the hesitation when they called, the careful way they asked how I was doing, as if I might break on the other end of the line. Chloe was quiet for a while. Then one day, she texted me. "I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you." That was all. I stared at the screen for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keys, wanting to respond with all the rage that burned inside me. But I did not. There was nothing she could say that would make it better. There was nothing I could say that would make it hurt less. So I deleted the message and turned off my phone. There were rumors. Whispers at work, strange looks when I walked into a room. I heard someone mention my name at the grocery store, followed by a quiet gasp and a sharp turn away. It was as if my heartbreak had become public property, something people could pass around, examine, judge. Some people reached out with kindness. Others simply watched from a distance, waiting to see what I would do next. I felt like a shadow of myself, a ghost in my own life. I could not go back to the house. Every room held pieces of him, of us. Every drawer, every picture on the wall, every little note left on the fridge. It felt like walking through a graveyard of memories, each one haunting me with what could have been. One night, I sat in my car outside our old place, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in my chest. I saw the lights on inside. I imagined them in there together, laughing, moving on, building something from the ashes of my life. I wanted to storm in, to demand answers, to scream. But I just sat there instead, frozen in place by the weight of everything I had lost. My friends tried to help. They brought food, offered couches, listened without judgment. But even in their warmth, I felt alone. I would nod and smile and tell them I was getting through it, but inside, I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left only the shell behind. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror and stared at myself. I barely recognized the woman looking back. Her eyes were tired, red-rimmed, swollen from too many sleepless nights. Her shoulders drooped, her face pale and drawn. I reached up and touched the glass, as if I could connect with the version of myself that had existed before all of this. But she was gone. I questioned everything. How could I not have seen it coming? How had I allowed myself to believe he had changed? How could I have trusted her so completely? I retraced every step, every decision, trying to find the moment I went wrong, the moment I should have turned away. But the truth was, I had loved them. Both of them. And that love had blinded me. The betrayal had not just broken my heart. It had shattered my sense of self. I did not know if I would ever trust again. I did not know if I even wanted to. The world felt unsafe, unstable. People were not who they said they were. Promises meant nothing. Love could be twisted, used, discarded. I started writing again. Journals full of pain, confusion, questions. It was the only way I could make sense of the storm inside me. Some days I wrote for hours. Other days, I could barely write a sentence. But slowly, the words began to form something resembling clarity. Not peace, not yet, but understanding. A fragile thread pulling me back to myself. One afternoon, I went back to the house with a friend. David was not there. I gathered my things quietly, without speaking. The rooms felt smaller now, the walls tighter. I boxed up the pieces of my life and carried them out one by one, each trip feeling like a final goodbye. In my closet, I found an old photo album. It was from our first year together. Smiles, vacations, laughter. I stared at one picture of the three of us, me, David, and Chloe. We looked so happy, so real. I tore the photo in half and dropped it in the trash. There were no more tears left that day. The pain still came in waves, but I had started to float. Some days I could breathe again without it hurting. Some days I laughed at something small and forgot, just for a moment, what I had lost. Other days, the grief clung to me like a second skin. But I kept going. I showed up. I got out of bed. I faced the world, even when I wanted to hide from it. I was still healing. I did not know what the future held. But I knew I deserved more than what I had been given. I deserved honesty, respect, love without betrayal. And even though everything still felt raw, I had taken the first step towards something better. Not because I was ready, but because I had no other choice. Because survival, in its own quiet way, was starting to look a lot like strength. It did not happen all at once. Healing never does. There was no dramatic breakthrough, no single moment where the world suddenly made sense again. It was quieter than that, softer. It came in little fragments. Morning walks when the sun felt warm on my face, a smile from a stranger, the slow, steady return of my own voice. At first, I went to therapy because I did not know what else to do. I sat across from a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, and I told her everything. The story spilled out of me in pieces, sometimes rushed and tangled, sometimes quiet and broken. She did not interrupt. She just listened. And when I had nothing left to say, she helped me begin to sort through the wreckage. We talked about trust, about how it is not just given but earned, and how I had been conditioned to offer it too freely. We talked about self-worth, about how deeply I had attached mine to people who never truly saw me. And we talked about pain, not just the kind that comes from betrayal, but the kind that burrows deep into your identity and tells you that you are not enough. It was hard work. Some sessions left me feeling like I had been cracked open. But slowly, I began to understand myself again. I stopped blaming myself for their choices. I stopped replaying every moment, trying to rewrite the past. I accepted that what they had done said more about them than it ever could about me. I also joined a support group. It took courage to walk into that room the first time, to look strangers in the eye and say out loud that I had been betrayed by someone I loved. But once I did, I realized I was not alone. There were other people carrying similar pain. Some of their stories were worse than mine. Others mirrored mine so closely it made my heart ache. But in that space I found solidarity. I found strength in shared survival. The woman I had been before all of this had vanished, but something new was forming in her place. I began to fill my time with things that brought me joy. I took a pottery class, even though my hands were clumsy. I went hiking, just to remind myself what it felt like to breathe in clean air and stand still beneath the trees. I read books that made me cry and books that made me laugh. I surrounded myself with people who reminded me what healthy love looked like. Eventually, I blocked both David and Chloe on everything. There were no more messages, no more explanations. I realized I did not need closure from them. Closure was not something they could give me, it was something I had to find on my own. And I did. One morning, I woke up and felt peaceful. Not happy, not yet, but peaceful. The sun came through the window, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I made myself coffee and stood by the window, watching the world move around me. It was just an ordinary moment, but it felt like a victory. Time passed, as it always does. And with it came clarity. I began to look back at everything with a new kind of honesty. Yes, I had loved him. Yes, I had trusted her. And yes, they had broken me in ways I never could have imagined. But their betrayal had taught me something vital, that I had survived. That I was stronger than I ever knew. That I could fall apart and still rebuild, not as I had been before, but as someone more resilient, more aware, more whole. The most important thing I learned was this. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It does not mean letting people back into your life. It means choosing to release the hold their actions have over you. I forgave them, not for their sake, but for mine, so that I could move forward without bitterness. So that I could create space in my heart for better things. And better things did come. I found new friendships, ones built on mutual respect and kindness. I met people who were thoughtful, who kept their promises, who showed up without being asked. I learned how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to protect my peace. I stopped explaining myself to those who did not deserve explanations. Most importantly, I began to fall in love with myself again. Not in a superficial way, but in a deep, grounded, patient way. I treated myself with the gentleness I used to reserve for others. I spoke kindly to my reflection. I reminded myself that my worth was not dependent on anyone's ability to recognize it. The pain did not disappear completely. There were still days when it crept back in, uninvited. A memory, a song, a random encounter could open an old wound. But I no longer let it control me. I had learned how to sit with my pain without letting it define me. I started writing more seriously. Not just in my journal, but stories, essays, little pieces of truth. I shared them online, anonymously at first. Then under my own name. The responses were overwhelming. People from all over reached out to say, "This is my story too." I realized that in sharing my own healing, I was helping others find theirs. It gave me purpose. It gave the pain meaning. I will never forget what happened. It will always be a part of my story. But it is no longer the ending. It is just one chapter, one that taught me how to rise. To anyone who has been betrayed, I want to say this. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not foolish for having loved. You are not weak for having trusted. The fault does not lie with you. The ones who lied, who hurt, who manipulated, that is their burden to carry, not yours. You deserve honesty. You deserve love that uplifts, not love that confuses or controls. You deserve friendships that are rooted in loyalty, not envy. You deserve a life that feels safe and joyful and full of possibility. And you will get there. Even if it feels impossible right now. Even if the pain is still fresh, still raw. Keep going. Keep breathing. Keep choosing yourself. One day, you will wake up and realize that you have survived the worst of it. And in its place, there will be something new. Something strong, something beautiful, something that belongs only to you. That is where I am now. Not at the finish line, but walking steadily forward. Carrying everything I have learned, everything I have lost, and everything I have become. I am no longer waiting for an apology. I am no longer searching for answers. I am building my life from the ground up, with truth, with courage, and with love that begins and ends with me.